Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to our channel and thanks for logging on. Today we're discussing the rose gold ultra luxury variant of my favorite Breguet luxury sports watch. This is the richest version of the Type 22 reference 3880BR. You can see this extraordinary 72,000 vibration per hour flyback rose gold aviator's chronograph and purchase it on our website. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you enjoy these videos, and please click on the card in the upper right hand corner of the screen at any time during this video to see our full sales listing for this watch with additional accessories included in the sale, high resolution images for your desktop, and naturally complete pricing details for this Grand Gold Breguet 20 beat per second flyback chronograph. Now the timepiece on my wrist represents the rose gold counterpart, the steel 3880ST that I reviewed a few days ago. This watch is substantially different. Eyes closed, you realize the heft of the rose gold case. It's impressive, it's solid, it looks and feels its station in the world of horology. There are also a few upgrades in terms of dial, color, and appliques that set this watch apart from the steel model. Also, in precious metal, the watch begins to take on an aura and persona, perhaps a little bit more South Beach and Sunset Strip than Head in the Clouds. This is a rich aviator's timepiece. If you're flying a Gulfstream, if you're flying first class, if perhaps you own the plane, this one's for you. Now, the bottom line is that it still fits like its steel counterpart, so that means 45.5 millimeters across the round of the case, not including chronograph pushers or crown. The watch is thick too, 17.8 millimeters thick. It stands proud of the wrist. This is one you're going to want to wear outside of any kind of cuff. You might be able to slip it underneath a suit jacket cuff just because of the dramatic slope of the conical profile of the bezel, but make no mistake, this will not clear any dress sleeve of the shirt beneath. From lug to lug, it's actually reasonable. 54 millimeters from lug to lug means it's not that much broader across the wrist than a traditional 44 millimeter Panerai Luminor, but make no mistake, it has a little bit of rigidity to the strap itself, so it does flare beyond the scope of the lugs, and I'll show you exactly what I mean. For the most part, you can pull the strap down quite easily. It is flexible, but it does have a little bit of virtual flare, which is to say there's that arc that you can't deny no matter how tight you pull it. It wants to splay out on both sides, which effectively extends the watch across the wrist for those of us with smaller forearms. I would say 16 centimeters circumference is my wrist. You could wear this watch securely on a wrist down to as small as, I'd say, 15 to 15 and a half, the lower end of that spectrum if your wrist is oval rather than round. Now the strap is substantial. As you can see, it closes the gap to the end of the case, so there's no daylight, creating a highly integrated all-of-a-piece aesthetic. It's substantial. It is a rich dark brown with rectangular scale alligator leather bolstered down the center dramatically to match the swell of the lugs and fill the flank of the case. You can also see it has a alternating contrasting stitch of white and red that mimics the calibration pattern of the seconds and minutes scale on the dial itself. Now the watch features an upscale Breguet rose gold buckle, and you'll also note that all finished on the inside of high polish. There isn't a single rough machined or stamped mark. It's what you would expect on a timepiece of this echelon and this caliber. Beautifully made, but simple. The case itself is anything but. Beautifully made, to be certain, but not simple. There's a little bit of a concave curvature to the lugs. They bow inward rather than out. All of high polish, the shoulder line is strongly defined. There's no transitional bevel, and you can see the coining of the case in Breguet style is present and correct. Cold rolled and then hand finished, beautifully made. There is a lot to love here. You'll also note the beaded style bezel is bi-directional, so I wouldn't use it for diving, though the watch is 100 meters water resistant, but it's nice to know you can line it up with the minute hand and then time two concurrent intervals up to 60 minutes. One up to 60 minutes, of course, with the bezel, and then you have a 12-hour register for the chronograph. But for 60 minutes, you can time two separate concurrent events. Now, moving down into the dial, you can see that there's a bit of an upscale aesthetic relative to our steel model from earlier in the week. Here we have applied rose gold numerals rather than printed, and the appliques are beautiful, diamond polished, raised, mirrored, and complemented by rose gold hands at center. You'll also note that there is a chocolate brown based coloration to the dial. It's not black like its steel counterpart, so there is a richness and a warmth that is becoming of a watch in this price point and of this character. This timepiece also featuring the same functionality as its steel counterpart. Let's start with the basics. You can see how smooth the sweep of chronograph seconds is. That's because it is beating 20 times per second. So it's effectively a 10 Hertz beat rate, or 72,000 vibrations per hour. It's twice as fast as the Zenith El Primero, which means you can barely see the steps as it stops and starts. You'll note that there are recesses for 3 sub-registers, but one of them is actually a 24-hour scale at 3 o'clock that acts as an AM-PM distinction for the time. There's a discrete monotone date disc at 6 o'clock, and as you can see, when you screw out the crown, and it is a screw-down crown, you have the ability to jump forward or backwards across the international date line. The quick-set hour hand drives the date. You can jump forward or backwards as you travel with no hazard to the movement. Also note that as I step the hour hand in 1 hour increments jumping time zones, I haven't stopped constant or chronograph function, so you can see constant seconds continuing to sweep, and you can see chronograph function continuing to elapse. So I can travel without interrupting the time as set on my watch or the timing as performed by the chronograph. Now, of course, if you pull the crown out to extremity, you do hack the watch. It features stop seconds, so you can halt the balance, and now you can synchronize precisely to a reference time. But what of this 20 beat per second chronograph seconds hand if I can't read the intervals? Well, the first thing you're going to notice, not only is it smoother, but it's actually faster. It's making 2 circuits of the dial per 60 seconds, so each time around the dial is 30 seconds, which means that it's easier to read the space on the dial as 1 second over 2 of these calibrations. It actually expands the space, the physical arc of the dial occupied by 1 second, so you can more precisely read how many fractions of a second are delineated by the chronograph seconds when you stop the watch. You also have a radial indicator for chronograph minutes, so I always find that with a chronograph I rarely time intervals of an hour or longer, so it's convenient to be able to read the most useful data, minutes and seconds, from the center of the dial, and Breguet obviously agrees. Now, the watch is fully luminescent, so 100 meters water resistant with a luminescent dial. Though rich and beautifully appointed, it is a sports watch, and it's powered by Breguet caliber 589F, so you have that incredible 20 beat per second 10 Hertz escapement, and it's facilitated by a escape wheel that could best be described as a sort of silicon snowflake or spider web. It doesn't have the traditional profile of a metal escape wheel. It looks like a thin iridescent blue lattice work, and actually the watch features a winding mass, if I can get it, there it is, in front of the viewport. The winding mass actually features the same pattern in a larger format, so you can actually see what that looks like if you're watching the video. That's exactly the pattern that you see in the spokes of the escape wheel. Now, the watch has a high rate escapement with a high speed and very small balance borne on a silicon hairspring. So silicon in the escapement, though it does use conventional pallet stones, and silicon in the hairspring to render the watch effectively anti-magnetic. You'll also note that it is a free-sprung balance, so better able to take and hold a precise regulation in the face of bumps and disruptions on the wrist. Both the free-sprung architecture and the high rate of the escapement serve that purpose. Now, automatic winding, it has a 40-hour power reserve when fully energized, so it's not a long duration power reserve, but frankly, given the rate of the escapement, 40 hours has to be considered something of a magic trick by Breguet's engineers. A handsome watch, a full-featured watch, a richer and yes, a warmer watch than its steel counterpart. You can see this Breguet Type XXII, which I almost forgot to mention, is also a flyback chronograph, on our website and purchase it there.